Welcome back into the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jed and Sap, presented by Full Press Coverage. Sap and we missed last week because the children at the school I worked with got me sick. And that is the danger of working in a school, Sap, is that you constantly get sick. Unfortunately, this wasn't just like a normal sickness. This was like another plague of Egypt that hit me. So fortunately, there was plenty of basketball to watch to keep me company as I nursed myself back to health. I shouldn't take all the credit. My wife helped me too. But basketball gets some of the credit too. But you know what's not fun when trying to get better and watching basketball is watching blowouts, Sap. And there have been a lot of blowouts in the NBA this season. And so you and I were talking a little bit off air, trying to figure out sort of why that is. And the closest I can come to an answer is it's a scheduling issue where the league, to me, needs to be more thoughtful about who they're scheduling for teams on the second night of back-to-back games, especially if you're talking about a marquee team. Let's just use the Celtics-Bucks game from last week as an example, right? The Celtics and Bucks was a marquee TNT game, and the Bucks just absolutely hammered the Celtics. Maybe the league needs to be more thoughtful about, well, if we want to feature these teams in a TV game, maybe make sure they're not coming off of a decent team. In the case of the Celtics, is against the Timberwolves, or a good team back-to-back nights.
Yeah, I mean, the Celtics and Timberwolves played on Wednesday night. That game went to overtime. Celtics prevailed. They're still undefeated at home, but then they had to catch a flight, go out to Milwaukee. The Bucks hadn't played since Monday, and they were at home the entire time, so they were ready to go. The Celtics kind of staggered into Milwaukee, and it felt like they were down 18 points after one quarter, and then it just grew to double that by the time we got to halftime. And at that point, Joe Mazzulla said no more, took the guys out of the game. I think, yeah, without question, scheduling is an issue, load management is an issue, and also style of play is an issue. Now, the Timberwolves on Wednesday night showed up to TD Garden. It felt like just after they got off the airplane at Logan International Airport, because they played the night before, and then they were snowed in and couldn't get into town and didn't get in till, I believe, early afternoon. So they had little or no rest, and they showed up and played. They brought it to overtime. So again, I don't want to get the violin out for the Celtics. They could have at least shown up and played better than they did against Milwaukee. But yeah, the circumstance was not a good situation for the Celtics to do that. And again, that's scheduling. That's a marquee game. Celtics, Milwaukee, two best teams in the Eastern Conference. The TV partners pay a lot of money for that game, and you've got one team sitting at home for a half a week. You got another team flying in, 12, 16 hours before the game starts. Obviously, it's unfair to that team that's traveling in, and this is what you end up with, to the point where TNT did something I very rarely, if ever, seen in an NBA telecast. They left the game and went to another game, which is
that was a blowout, by the way. The other game at that point, and it ended up not being a blowout, but when they switched to the Mavericks-Knicks game, it was a 20-point game. It's not like it was competitive.
Wasn't there also a 62-point game that night too? I mean,
the Thunder beat the Trailblazers that night, 139-77.
Yeah, 62 points. So the Celtics actually wasn't the biggest blowout of the night. So, like, what is TNT supposed to do? Maybe.
And the Lakers got blown out that night too, Sap. The Lakers got blown out by the Suns.
Just go into the archives and show, Game 7 of the 1984 finals between the Celtics and Lakers. That was certainly more enthralling than Celtics Bucks. So that's an issue, and I think it's a problem because it's tuning fans out, and it's not good for the TV partners who pay a ton of money for the rights fees. I mean, the NBA is working on a new contract. I know we're going to talk about that later on in the podcast, but they're looking for $75 billion over 10 years. That comes to about $250 million per team per year. I mean, that's how the league is funded. So you've got to give them a better product. So obviously scheduling is an issue. Load management is an issue because there are just like scheduled losses, right? If you're playing 5 games in 7 nights, which the Celtics were involved in, something like that, by the time you get to that 5th game in 7 nights, start to rest guys. You don't have a lot left. And then there've been other times this year where the Celtics seem like they played 2 games in 7 nights. Like the schedule just doesn't seem fair or even. And I'm not, a green teamer. We're just using them as an example because we follow them probably a little more closely than the rest of the league. So that is an issue. But also style of play, Jet. With the prevalence of the 3-point shot, if you've got one team hitting 50% of their threes and another team hitting 25% of the threes, just figure the math out, right? If they both take 43-point shots, one hits 20, the other one only hits 10, that's a 30-point difference. So there you are. There's the start of a blowout. Also, if a team is down 21, 22, 23 points, there's a chance they can come back because of the 3-point shot. But there's also a good chance that that 21, 22, 23-point lead can be 45 points, because if they're not hitting their threes and the other team is efficient on offense, now you've got a massive blowout. So all of those things are kind of intertwined. I think that scheduling is a big part of it. The league has got to be better at that, because you're asking people to tune in, but even more so, you're asking people to pay $400-500 per ticket to go see this, and then they get to the game and it's not good.
Yeah, and I think again, it's less of a feeling bad for the team thing. Again, everybody ultimately plays basically the same schedule. There's a couple different games here and there. Um, and so I don't feel bad that the Celtics had to do this, but if you're trying to grow the sport and you do that by, making more money for the teams and the league is more profitable, you have to pay special attention to, okay, here are the games that the TV networks or we have circled as what we think should be the marquee games of the season, the marquee matchups. Here's the 50 or so games we think should be the best games. You need to make sure that when looking at those games, that the schedule is pretty clear coming up to those games. Maybe each team has 2 days rest. Maybe a team is not having to travel from across the country necessarily on play the next day. So scheduling is really hard. I mean, I'm not trying to say it's just, you snap your fingers and this happens. Like, you have to take into account the schedule for 30 different teams who share. A lot of those teams share their arena with hockey teams. Some of them share their arena with other teams. They constantly have concerts or circuses or Disney on Ice coming in. It's not an easy job to figure it out, but it would behoove the league to really try to hone in on what they think are the most impactful games or the most marquee games, marquee matchups between players or teams of the season, and make sure that they can do everything they can to build the schedule around those games so that they give those games the best chance of being competitive.
Oh, without question, because that's what you want. You don't want to see Celtics Bucks, and it feels like you're watching an NBA team against a college team, because the team that is as good as the other team just is staggering out there because of jet lag or load management, and then at some point they just give up at halftime. And I think Joe Mazzulla made the right call. Why expend
Sure.
all that energy when you've got
They
more
had no
games coming
chance.
up?
They had
No,
no chance of
they're
coming
not going
back.
to
It
come
was
back from
over.
that. So rest your starters, play the bench, give them some valuable minutes, and you move on from there. It's an 82 game schedule. Now, maybe one way you could get around this too, and I know the season's already roughly 6 months long. Could you extend the regular season an extra 2 weeks, maybe 1 week early to start the season, 1 week later to end it? So now it's a 6.5 month regular season. I get it. That's a long regular season, but at least you have the opportunity to maybe stretch things out a little bit. So you're not condensing 82 games into, say, 175 days, which is going to obviously lend itself to a lot of back to backs, or 5 games in 7 nights and some crazy travel. Maybe that's something that they could look at. I don't know if the players would balk on that, but again, you're starting a week early, you're finishing a week later, things get stretched out, gives them a little more breathing room so they don't get into these situations, where one team is at home for 3 days leading into the game and the other one's traveling in to town, 12, 14, 16 hours before tip off. It just doesn't seem like it's fair.
Yeah, and statistically, again, we follow the Celtics a little bit closer than the rest of the league because we're based in Boston. But they had played the most difficult schedule up until this point, and why should you be by a wide margin be playing a more difficult schedule than everybody else when everybody's ultimately going to be playing the same thing? So maybe like if people know who the contenders are at the beginning of the season for the most part. Try to balance the schedules out a little bit more. Again, it's hard. I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but I do think that a lot of what we're seeing with blowouts this year is in large part because of, I don't want to say lazy scheduling, but I'll say like unthoughtful scheduling. And that if
Mm-hmm.
I was a TV partner of the NBA, I would be pissed and say, you guys need to pay more attention to, we don't want to have the Celtics traveling to Milwaukee in what should be, one of the biggest games in the Eastern Conference, if not the NBA all season. We don't want the Celtics having to travel there after playing, and arrive after playing a game that, I've obviously went to overtime. we don't want them playing the next day. We want them at least being fresh and having it have the chance to be a more competitive game. Listen, it's basketball. Things get weird. The Celtics could have had 2 days rest gone in Milwaukee and still got blown out by 40 points. There's no
Mm-hmm.
guarantee, but you play the odds. It's much more likely that they're going to be able to be at full strength and put on a more competitive game than what we saw on Thursday night, which was not fun for anybody to watch. Maybe just for the Bucks. Sorry, for Bucks fans, I'm sure it was really fun to watch. But for everybody else, it was a slog. There was no intrinsic value in watching that game after the first 8 minutes of it. It was over. So you didn't learn anything about the Bucks. You didn't learn anything about the Celtics. You didn't even get to really see the players you wanted to see showcased because the game was so over that you weren't seeing good players play into the fourth quarter. In the case of the Celtics, you weren't seeing any of their best players play in the whole second half. So
Yeah, no, not a good product, and certainly that was a marquee game. And again, I think part of it also ties into the way the game is played right now in the NBA with how many threes each
oh,
team attempts.
absolutely.
That now you're going to get what felt like, I mean, you're probably too young to remember, but in the 80s and early 90s and almost to the mid 90s, the Super Bowls were unwatchable. They were over at halftime.
Yeah, the
You had like
conference championship games were much better.
exactly, because then you'd get to the Super Bowl, and the NFC won 15 of 16 Super Bowls between 1981 and 1996. Imagine that, a 16-year stretch where the NFC won 15 of 16 Super Bowls, and
It's
many
like
were
the American
blowouts.
League and the All-Star game. I don't know what that noise
Absolutely.
was. Yeah,
It,
but that's
it
what it
was
was
the
like.
same exact thing. Yeah, I mean, you had San Francisco over Denver 55-10. You had the Patriots losing to the Bears 46-10. I mean, I was a big drinker back then. Like, I was already smashed by halftime because I didn't need to
There's
watch
nothing
the
else to
second half
do,
of the game.
right?
No, just if you had your squares, maybe you could win one of those in the third quarter or with the final score, but they were unwatchable. And then once the Patriots started getting involved in Super Bowls, with Brady and Belichick, all those games were close and memorable. And then now
Yeah.
we've seen mostly good Super Bowls, even last year. Kansas City and Philadelphia, 38-35, game-winning field goal by Kansas City pretty much at the buzzer. So, yeah, you want to have that competitiveness, but again, when you've got three-point shooting being such a big part of it, you're going to see some blowouts. You can also see those comebacks, which are exciting to watch. It feels like a 25-point deficit is what maybe a 12 or 13-point
Yeah.
deficit
Yeah.
used to be before, but also a 25-point deficit can turn into a 50-point deficit pretty quickly if you're playing Golden State and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson hitting all their threes. I mean, good luck with that. And you're not hitting your threes. You're going to be down by 30 points in the third quarter. And again, that's not good for the TV audience or the people in the arena.
No, another people who wouldn't be good for SAP is a streaming audience, and we bring that up because uh, Peacock was the proud presenter of the first ever stream exclusive playoff game for the NFL over this past weekend, and by all accounts, it went pretty good. No major issues with the broadcast, except for the millions of people who were wondering what the hell Peacock was and how to access it, and then finding out that it wasn't free and you had to pay for it. So there's going to come a time, Sap, when the NBA is going to be exploring the streaming model. It may be with their next TV deal. So it might be sooner than people think. I don't think it's going to get to the point where the playoffs are exclusively streamed on Peacock or Amazon or anything like that. But I do think that there is going to be in this new TV deal a carved out part for either Apple or Amazon where they're getting some of these primetime games that would usually go to ESPN or ABC or TNT. And so the question is, what's that going to look like?
It's going to happen at some point, right? And it probably will be part of this new TV contract. Again, by all accounts, it's going to be 10 years, $75 billion, which will be $250 million per team per year. I mean, that basically covers a team's expenses, as far as players, front office staff, travel, all of that stuff. So now ticket sales, concessions, other media contracts is profit. That's why these teams are selling for $4.5 billion. They're cash cows. So you want to make sure that your TV contract is secure, but you also want to make sure that your TV partners are happy with that, because if you're forking out all this money and no one's watching, then it's not a good partnership. As far as streaming, what happened the other night, they still got 27, 28 million people to watch that game. Now, Kansas City's the marquee team in the league. The Packers and Cowboys, who were on Fox the following day, drew 40 million people. But Cowboys and Packers are two of the biggest brands in all of football. I mean, you could put the Cowboys on against,
Yeah, the
the
Cowboys are the
worst team in
biggest brand for
football.
sure.
Yeah, and it's the NFL. You could take the 8 worst teams in football, which includes the New England Patriots, unfortunately, this year, put them into the divisional round, and the ratings would still be phenomenal. Like Patriots against Commanders, or well, they're in different conferences, but you get my
Yeah,
idea there. That the worst 8 teams in football
they
would still
did
get
play.
massive ratings. They did play each other, and I'm sure got good ratings because that's the NFL. But as far as streaming the NBA, it's going to happen, and I think of all the audiences that are going to be able to deal with it, it's probably the NBA fan base. It's a little younger, it's a little more hip. Like I think I hate using that term hip. I sound like I'm ancient, but in terms of they're more forward thinking on these things. And by the way, when people complain about whatever it was going to cost for Peacock because they didn't want to pay for it, well, you pay for all your games anyway. If you have cable TV, you pay a very high amount of money to watch those games. If you have ESPN on your basic cable, that costs you $10 per month. It's there. I mean, it's not necessary that you're paying ESPN directly, but you pay your cable rights holder, and then they fork it over to ESPN. They actually mark it up. You're probably paying a little bit more than that. I think ESPN makes $10 per month per subscriber. That's how they fund a lot of their programming. So you're paying for ESPN already. You're paying for
Right.
your cable rights. So this is just an add-on. I think with football's such a wide audience. You've got all shapes and sizes and ages. That it's going to still do well. But basketball, I would think that the audience that follows basketball, and again, it's not a niche sport, but it's not quite as wide based as football. That people your age group, right? Early to mid 30s are doing this anyway. You're streaming already. This is no big deal. The only issue I have with streaming is, and again, I'm ignorant to it, to be quite frank with you, is sometimes the streaming isn't as strong as a regular cable station,
Oh no,
where
it craps out. Yeah,
it
it craps
craps out
out.
a lot. That's an issue. And also the fact that isn't it difficult to change from that channel to another channel? You have to go back
Yeah,
to it.
it's
So
tricky.
that's also an issue for older people, and you don't want to turn older people off. They're still a big part of what the sports fan base is.
Yeah, and they have buying power, so that's
Yes,
still
they
a
still
thing.
do. Yeah. Yep.
And that's ultimately what it all comes down to, is the buying power. Um, Sap, just as a note, of the top 30 watched programs in the United States last year, 29 of them were football games, and one was the Oscars. That was the 15th most watched. The top 14 were all football. 15 was the Oscars, then the rest was football, and then the college basketball championship, UConn San Diego State, that was 31. Then a bunch more football, then some NBA and college basketball sprinkled in there. A 60 Minutes episode with Zelensky. So yeah, it's of the 100 top 100, I believe 80. It looks like 88 of them were football games.
Crazy. 44%.
And NFL
88 of
football
100
games.
is
Yeah.
88%. I
So
got it complicated. So no, it's crazy because it's the one thing. First of all, the fan base is again urban, rural, black, white, old, young, male, female. I think 40% of people that watch football on a regular basis are women. That's not the
yeah,
same number as say basketball, baseball, or hockey. It's not the same. It's once a week. Although they're doing a little bit too much of it with Thursday and Saturday and Sunday and Monday. And oh, by the way, we've got COVID. Let's throw a game on Tuesday because
right.
3 people tested positive for COVID. That did happen in 2020. I think the Steelers played like it felt like every day of the week at some point. But the thing that you have to make sure is, and Mark Cuban, who is still running the Dallas Mavericks, but is no longer their principal owner. At least he hasn't. He's in the process of selling the team. He said it: pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. I just wonder if the NFL is going to be too much at some point where it turns some people off. I doubt that's going to happen in our lifetime, but maybe down the road people will get turned off by that. But yeah, the numbers
Well,
were great.
I was gonna say something. If you listen to Brett Favre, he says that Taylor Swift is turning people off of football.
Um, okay, so we got to translate what Brett Favre had to say.
He's a
You know what? He's a boob, obviously. My quarterback from Green Bay can be a boob too.
yeah.
Now these the Jets. Maybe
Jeez,
Jordan
man,
Love
is
will
it
be a
is
good
it
guy.
so cold? Is it so cold there
No,
that it
I've
just
told you
rots your
before.
brain?
No, you know what it is? There's not much that goes on in Green Bay. You are literally it. Like the team is it and the quarterback is it, and both quarterbacks were great. I mean,
So
you
you
can
get an
talk about that they
inflated
should have won
sense of
more.
self. Is that
You
what
are
it is?
it. You are it. I mean, like when Tom Brady was winning 6 Super Bowls in New England, the Red Sox are still pretty popular. David Ortiz was pretty popular. You had a hockey team that won a Stanley Cup. You had some great basketball players in Green Bay. That's it. And they feel entitled. And essentially, Aaron Rodgers grew into what Brett Favre was. Like he tried not to be Brett Favre, and I think he did a better job of mentoring his successor. Like Brett Favre just shunned Aaron
Right.
Rodgers away when he drafted him. I think Aaron Rodgers actually did a pretty good job for 3 years with Jordan Love, and because that's all the reports are that he really embraced him. So that's a good thing. But yeah, they kind of turned into each other, Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, although they're completely different. One guy is urban, one guy is rural, but in the end, they have a lot of similarities. But Taylor Swift ruining I don't think anyone's ruining the NFL. I just think that she might be ruining the Kansas City Chiefs. They appear to be distracted between Taylor Swift with Travis Kelsey and Patrick Mahomes' wife and brother.
Yeah.
The Chiefs
That's
seem a bit distracted, and maybe they can't handle all of that outside interference that the Patriots were so good at handling. How the Patriots had a serial killer in their locker room for a
yes,
year,
they did.
and they
They did.
still managed to get to the AFC Championship game.
They
They
did
didn't know
indeed.
about it at that point, although maybe they did. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we could delve for hours and hours, and that man. Just I know there's a Apple TV. Speaking of streaming, documentary I think coming out about the like multi-part about the Patriots dynasty, and just like
Mm-hmm.
man, there's so much you could do because it's so long. I mean, the Aaron
Right.
Hernandez thing was halfway through. There was a whole thing that happened before and after that.
Yeah, it was
So
2013 when I think we were working together at 1510 NBC Sports Boston radio, and
yeah.
and it was June of 2013. He played the 12th season in June of 2013. We remember, the helicopter following him to the gas station, and he's going to be charged with murder. So that's 11 years ago. After that, they won 3 more Super Bowls. There's the whole
Just
Garoppolo
kept on
story. There's
rolling. Yeah.
yeah, Deflategate and Spygate, and the relationship among Brady, Belichick, and Kraft. I mean, it's Shakespearean in some sense. And again, like you said, so long. So, and
Well,
again, it was a week ago that Robert Kraft said so long to Bill
yeah.
Belichick. But
Yeah. You
yeah,
got
that's
that
going to
right
be
on our
interesting.
last podcast. You did.
Yeah,
You had
yeah,
that. You called
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, I saw that coming. I didn't see maybe Gerard Mayo getting named head coach that quickly, and
Oof.
apparently not having a general manager. I don't know what they're doing over
That's
there. I think
Jonathan Kraft. He's the general
Jonathan
manager
Kraft,
now.
yes, he's well. You know what? Let Jonathan pick the players because Kraft, Belichick wasn't very good at the last 10 years anyway. So I don't know if Jonathan Kraft could do much worse. He could just buy one of those draft guides and just go by that, or just use Mel Kiper's top 100 and go on
Yeah,
auto draft. Might be better than
it would
Belichick's
be.
drafting
Yeah, honestly, it
record the
would be.
last 10 years. Why not? But the best line I saw in any of the previews of that is Danny Amendola saying, "We worked for Bill, we played for Tom." Man, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah, yeah. That is.
We've talked a lot of football in the podcast
Yeah,
today, but
we
that's
have.
okay.
No, that's totally fine. I mean, it's there's a lot of football stuff going on in the news. In the span of 2 days, Nick Saban and Bill Belichick and Pete Carroll all bit the dust. So,
Pretty
uh,
amazing, yeah.
Um, Sap, we were going to talk about the Netflix series that got announced about the NBA players, and I really do want to talk about that. But before we do, I think we should talk about that maybe next week or later in the week, because I did want to say something, and I'm sorry I'm springing this on you, Sap, about the Bulls Ring of Honor ceremony that happened before
Yes,
it's
I'm
too
glad you
far out
brought
of the
that up.
too
Yeah,
far out of the
I'm glad you
rearview
brought that
mirror.
up. Yep.
If you don't know, the Bulls did their first like Ring of Honor, which is unusual for an NBA team. It's more of a football thing, but they had their first class inducted into their essentially it's a Bulls Hall of Fame. So it's who you would expect, Jordan, Pippen, Rodman, the whole team that set the wins record. What was that, Sap? 96, 97
95,
Bulls?
96. They won
95,
72
96
and 10.
Bulls.
Yep.
Okay. That so they all got in, and coaches will Phil Jackson, Tex Winter, the guy who developed the triangle offense, and Jerry Krause, the general manager, the architect of all those Bulls teams. And Jerry Krause has since passed several years back, and so his wife, his widow, was there to represent him, and the Chicago Bulls fans booed when Jerry Krause's his face came up, and his widow was obviously very distraught and credit to some of the Bulls players and staff. Ron Harper, I saw, was helping console her. Steve Kerr was there too because they were playing the Warriors. But really just an awful display by the Bulls fans, and they deserve a lot of blame, and a lot of blame also lies on Michael Jordan for the Last Dance, because there's just a fundamental lack of understanding that fans have about all the machinations that go into being in the front office and creating a team. And certainly Jerry Krause had a lot of faults. But I mean, he was also responsible for getting Scottie Pippen and getting Dennis Rodman and hiring Phil Jackson and getting Tony Kukoc. And so, as great, and I think Michael Jordan's the greatest player of all time. You've heard me say it multiple times. As great as Michael Jordan, I know, Sap, you're LeBron, number one. We know that. As great as Michael Jordan was, it's very possible, in fact, I'd say likely, that I'm not saying he wouldn't win any championships, but that he doesn't win 6 without the influence and the roster building of Jerry Krause. We saw what Michael Jordan as a general manager was for many years in the Wizards. Not great at evaluating talent. So to boo that guy is just, I think it's ignorant at its core, and it's just so petty. And I'm sure Michael Jordan loved it, but from afar, he wasn't there. But we needed to talk about it, Sap, because it was.
I'm glad you brought it up. Yeah, I'm glad you brought it up. It's disgusting. It really is. I mean, whether you like Jerry Krause or not, that's beside the point. His widow was there, like show class, right? And that seems like something that we'd see in Philadelphia, because Philadelphia is generally considered like the most classless sports city in America. Like they booed Santa Claus, they boo injured players. I remember Michael Irvin hit his head on the turf back in the late 90s at the old Vet, which was the turf was on cement. So there were a lot of concussions at that place, and he was out cold, and they were booing him. But to have this happen in Chicago, which everyone always thinks Chicago is this Midwest city that people are lovable, but there's an edge to Chicago. I mean, the winters are god awful. It's the 3rd largest city. There's a lot of crime. It's whatever. And again, Michael Jordan. I mean, Michael Jordan is so loved and revered in that city that if he's going to trash Jerry Krause, then the fan base is just going to follow right behind him like lemmings. But to do that to his widow, that's one of the most disgusting things I've ever seen.
Yeah, it was gross.
And what did she do other than show up to represent her husband, who passed away years ago?
I heard a lot of people, were saying, well, we didn't know the widow was there. Like, they just showed a picture on the big screen first of Jerry Krause. And, like, even if she wasn't there, which she was, and, they showed her too, like, it's not a night to be booing somebody.
No.
He wasn't. It was a night to be celebrating your team's accomplishments. Why are you booing him on that? Like, if you wanted to do it, like, voice your opinion, like, go blog or write something on Twitter or something like that.
Like, what are you booing a dead person for, other than like Adolf Hitler or something?
A dead person who won you guys 6 championships. Like, I mean, did he possibly cost them maybe 1, maybe 2 more? Possibly, but I mean, he won a lot.
Gambling may have cost them 2 as well. So, you want to boo him?
And it's a stretch to say, okay, well, if they didn't break up the team, they would have won 2 more. Like, Pippen was fading at that point.
At that point, no, I don't think they would have won. No, I don't think
Rodman never really played meaningful basketball again after that.
And Pippen sucked after that, and was
so like, okay, well, in the fantasy Michael Jordan world, again, all due respect, I think he's the greatest basketball player who ever lived.
Oh, he only played 6 seasons, don't you know?
He only played 6 seasons
in the NBA, and he won 6 championships. Yeah, he would have won the 2 that he didn't play if he had played, even though, don't get me going.
But they're taking Sap, the hypothetical 2, and they're putting more weight on that than the actual 6. Like, it makes no sense.
Kind of like Belichick with his boat, 8 rings, right? He's giving himself 2 as
defensive coordinator
with the Giants.
Yeah, Jordan didn't win 8. Jordan wasn't a coordinator for 2 hypothetical championships.
Yeah, but the defensive coordinator doesn't get credit for the Super Bowl.
Yeah, but
wins.
I'm saying it has more validity than this.
Well, it does, yeah. Well, I always push back. People said he would have won 8 in a row. Well, okay, the 2 years that he did come back in 1995. He did come back in March. He put up 55 against the Knicks, and then he won in the first round, lost in the second round to Orlando. That happened. I remember that. Then he, the next year they won the championship. The year he sat out, they did make it to the second round, only won 2 fewer games, and Scottie Pippen was 3rd MVP voting. But everyone says he would have won 8 in a row. Okay, those 2 years he would have had to beat Hakeem Olajuwon in the finals. Do you know
Well, and
what
how
Michael
are those
Jordan?
2 years on Jerry Krause? Why are those
Well,
2
no,
years
no,
on
but
Jerry
I'm
Krause?
going on a rant about Michael Jordan. Let me finish. Um, so
Sorry.
you know the one thing Michael Jordan never faced in the finals was a good center. Like, is it just a fait accompli that, well, Michael Jordan would have figured out how to beat Akeem Olajuwon, who at that point, once Jordan stepped aside, was the best player in the world and was unstoppable in both finals. So, like, okay, yeah, sure, he would have just. Patriot fans do this too. Like, well, if the Patriots had won that game, they certainly would have beat the Bears in the Super Bowl that year. Well, you know what? The Patriots played the Bears that year in the regular season in Foxborough. They beat them by 3 points. How do we know they would have beat the Bears in the Super Bowl? I know it was Rex Grossman, but hey, Tom Brady lost 2 Super Bowls to Eli Manning and one to Nick Foles. So I mean, that I've said my piece.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's a lot to talk about with it
Yeah,
because it's the most fascinating, person maybe in sports history and Michael Jordan in terms of just the aura around him
and he
and
can't show up to the thing.
neither did Pippen. It's probably better
Yeah,
to
they're
keep
they're
those
all.
two apart.
Yeah,
But
probably
neither
keep them
did
out of this.
Rodman. It
Yeah,
was like the lamest. It was the lamest ceremony, and then it was the cherry on top was the booing of the widow.
it's
But like
disgusting.
again, it's just weird to me, and I think it's an ignorance of what happened that they're so much more upset about the team possibly having had a little bit more success at the very tail end of it than the unbelievable, virtually
Right.
unparalleled success that they had in large part because of Jerry Krause. Like, I will, if we want to go along with everything and say, then Jerry Krause directly cost him winning 2 more championships at the end, then you also have to give him direct
Credit for
responsibility
winning
for
six.
winning the six.
Well,
Like,
Patriot
how can
fans
you
do
do
the
it both
same thing,
ways?
right? Like Patriot fans do the same thing. Like, oh, if they just kept Brady here, they would have won 2 more Super Bowls. No, they wouldn't have. The roster
No, but they
wasn't
would have
good
been
enough, right?
better.
Oh, well, hell yeah,
They would.
absolutely. They would have been better than 4-13. Although
And
Tampa
to the
Bay
Bulls'
is.
point, Sap, if the Bulls had just stayed together, they would have been better than what they ended up becoming, which is
Oh
one of the
yeah,
most irrelevant teams in the NBA since
25
Jordan
years now.
retired.
Yeah,
Irrelevant.
yeah, they're horrible. They're like the New York Jets of the NBA. The Yeah, just it was disgusting for that part. Now, you don't have to be a big fan of Jerry Krause. Obviously, the weird thing about that last season, going into or during the season, he said we can go 82-0 and sweep through the playoffs. At the time, I think 15-0 would have swept through the playoffs. So you would have went 97-0, and there's no way Phil Jackson's coming back. That's a bit strong, but that's Jerry Krause. But the man died several years ago. His widow's there. Just shows some class. That showed absolutely no class. What an awful event, though. Your three best players of the era don't show up. Was Horace Grant there? Was he even invited? Like, I
Uh,
know he was a big part of the first 3 championships, and he was the one player that stood up to Michael Jordan. He did not take Jordan's nonsense. He and Robert Parrish. Parrish, of course, was much later on and was like 40 years old when he played with the Bulls. And Jordan tried to start with him, and Parrish basically said, go check. Well, they didn't have YouTube at the time. I'll go check what I did to Bill Laimbeer on the court. Shut the bleep up. I've won
right.
championships too. You didn't invent the game. So I'm glad when someone stands up to someone like that. But yeah, no class for Bulls fans. Bad, bad thing.
I wonder if it's going to, not that they've been a big free agent destination, but if I was a player, I know Krause wasn't a player at all. I would look at it and say, so if I win there and it ends poorly, they're gonna boo me. I don't know. It's not it's a very dysfunctional organization
It
that
is.
again has been except for the period of time Michael Jordan was a part of it, has been just completely irrelevant. And the crazy thing is too, Sep, I was in Spain over the Christmas holiday, and you see bull stuff freaking
It's the logo.
everywhere,
It's the coolest
everywhere.
logo in sports. And again, you're in Spain, Bulls, kind of a connection,
It's true, but like, so there's
maybe.
Lakers stuff there and Bull stuff. Those were the two
And
NBA teams that were
exactly.
represented,
Yep. Have you ever
and
been to
it's
Primark?
because of Michael Jordan.
Yeah. Oh no, he's still the biggest athlete in this country. He doesn't even have
Yeah,
to show up to the.
I've been to Primark,
Okay,
by the
if
way.
you've been to Primark, they have a little NBA section here in Boston, and it's Lakers, Bulls, and a little bit of Celtics. It's almost like they have Bulls and Lakers in all of their stores, and then they'll put the local team in wherever it is. So yeah, it's crazy. It's a cool logo, the red and black, but it's Michael Jordan. I like Michael Jordan is the biggest athlete in the history of this country. I don't even know who's number two. He had the biggest impact on his sport, on marketing. He still is so powerful, and he's just sold his team, and no one ever hears from him other than his 10-part documentary. He still makes $200 million a year from Nike,
Well, he
right?
was at
Which
the
is like,
national championship game, Sep, the Michigan Washington game in the box with Stephen A. Smith.
right. Yeah.
They're
Yeah.
friends, apparently,
They're
which,
very close friends. Yeah. Well, I mean, again, and people pick sides, and Stephen A is always,
yeah.
Jordan's better than LeBron, and then he always fights back and said, "Hey, I've said LeBron's number 2 of all the players in the history of the sport." I mean, people pick their sides. I like when I hear someone who kind of covered the league at that time that actually gives LeBron his props. My old thing with the LeBron Jordan thing is you pick whoever you want. We'll have a debate. Just let's have a debate. I hate when people say it's not even close because that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, I think, Sap, my big takeaway from this is that, well, two things. One is just the incredible influence Michael Jordan has over people.
Still,
It's remarkable. And two, the Bulls fans deserve being terrible. If that's how they're going to act and they're going to be completely classless, then you deserve to be in mediocrity forever. And that's honestly where they've been since Jordan left. And that appears to be where they'll stay because it doesn't look bright there for the near future, Sap.
no, they can't get out of their own way. I'm not kidding here. I'm still surprised there isn't an official holiday in Chicago, in the state of Illinois, for Michael Jordan, like his birthday. Like
He's more
I'm not.
popular there than Lincoln, who's from there.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, he is. He's that popular. And again, we're talking about a guy who is miserable. Like but I think people
Yeah,
appreciate
does
that
he
because
ever even go back to Chicago?
no,
Like,
if ever, no. I think he had a home there. Obviously he had a home there when he played there. But I just think that it's amazing. He's got like a spell, cast a spell over, especially guys in their late 30s to
yes.
late 40s. Like you
Yep.
can't have a debate with anybody in that age group about who the greatest player is. They don't want to hear it at all. It's kind of interesting. Like my brother is
Or
69
Skip
and he
Bayless.
Oh, Skip Bayless, yeah. My brother's 69. He's a huge basketball fan, loves the Celtics, all of that. And the one thing I give him a ton of credit for, he loves the modern players. He loves Jason Tatum. Like we've had debates. He thinks Jason Tatum's going to be better than Bird. And this is an older guy saying that, which is kind of cool, actually. I kind of like that. But he thinks LeBron's better than Jordan. But so you might have a better chance, and that's maybe why we get along well. But I think that's something you'll see from older people because I think they appreciate some of the things that LeBron has done. But your age to about late 40s, I don't have a chance. I don't even bother debating people in that age group about this because they don't even want to debate it. They don't even want to, try. They just,
No, or
six
they'll
championships.
boo you. They'll boo
Oh, they'll
your
boo
widow.
me and Jerry Krause's widow, apparently. Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah.
That was, but back to your point, Jen, I'm glad you brought up, that was disgusting.
Yeah. No, it really was. And it's gonna haunt the fan base for a while. They're gonna have to wear it as a scarlet, scarlet letter. Just like the Philly
Yeah.
fans booing Santa and throwing snowballs at him or throwing batteries, whatever the
Or
hell they do.
one of the dumbest things I ever saw, Patriot fans booing Adam Vinatieri.
Yeah, that was ridiculous. Stupid. So
He went
stupid.
to make more money in Indianapolis. Bill Belichick didn't want to pay him. He left.
Yeah.
Or anybody that booed Tom Brady the night he returned to play against the Patriots. I'm like, are you guys crazy?
Yeah, well, but that's going to do it for us here, Sap, at the Pick and Roll NBA podcast with Jet and Sap. Check out our social medias at JohnSap25, at Jet Strayer. Check out Full Press Coverage for all sorts of great content. We'll be back next week. We'll be talking about that Netflix NBA show, which looks awesome. Lots of other NBA stuff, so stick with us, and we will talk to you later. See you, everybody.